Channel 2. Jeez.
Hey, Channel 2 was the first news station that I ever did a story with in Tulsa, so I'll wait for Channel 2.
Perfect.
Oh gosh, it was years ago. I don't remember what case it was about.
Reporter?
Brianne Palmerini.
Brianne Palmerini.
I do. I don't normally remember names, but I remember that name.
I forget that name.
I had a news station calling me this morning before I could even get the press release out.
Oh, no, my phone has been blowing up all day. I was a little taken aback. This is not my normal. You know,
This is what I've
I'll go argue in court all day, no problem.
This is
In front of
what
the
we've
Supreme
been
Court, no
dealing with
problem.
for the last 2 weeks.
Well, good. People need to know. I mean, you know, it's absurd what they did, which is why you were able to convince me to get involved in the first place. All because you came to me about 796 and 797, when I thought you were crazy for doing those at first.
You wasn't the only one that thought it.
Oh yeah, I really did. No. He comes to me and he's like, "We're gonna do these." I was like, "We already have 788." He's like, "No, we need these." And then I start seeing the news reports about yen and all that stuff, and I was like, "All right, Isaac, you're right." So
It worked out. It really did.
We got those drafted real quick.
It's funny how things work out, and I think that's the biggest blessing of the whole 788 deal was you guys kicked off those petitions, and I think it brought everybody together. It really brought everybody together.
It's not often that I end up completely right about something.
Yeah, it was good.
Hey,
Most of the time I have egg on my face.
don't get a big head, Isaac.
Completely is an awful big word.
Yeah.
No, completely.
No, but I think it sort of outed the bad players, and it shined some light, and brought us all together. So I thought it was really good.
You mean the ones that have just sole economic interests in mind and would rather just do whatever they can to control the market?
Yeah,
those people.
Folks,
Oh, okay.
and then the folks with the ginormous egos that like to say bad things about other people. Those folks.
Yeah,
my
that's
ego's not that
counterproductive.
big.
And Chris.
All right, Channel 2.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Chris Moe?
Chris Moe.
Yeah, their camera's
with Green
here.
Vote?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm also
Oh,
on the
so
same board
camera's
as
on.
Chip.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
their
also
camera's
on the board
here.
of the Cannabis Trade Association.
She can catch up later.
Okay.
We have a 5 o'clock package.
Oh, okay,
We
so-
don't have big
90% of the
deadlines.
stations.
Okay. So these fellows do have deadlines. So what time is it?
It's 2:01.
Okay.
We're gonna give them till 2:05. That work for you guys? Can y'all make your deadline still? 5 minutes gonna hurt you? We're not gonna talk as long as that last press
I'll tell
conference
you
I
at
saw.
5 o'clock.
Sorry. Sorry about the last one.
We're not gonna, unless your reporters ask a lot of questions, we're not gonna go 45 minutes here. I don't think there's a need for that.
Speaking, if you're on the edge,
Yeah, I'll talk.
raise your voice.
Yeah.
Because
Don't worry.
it's going to pick up that.
Yeah. I will project.
I gotta sip a drink while I'm waiting.
Oh, hi everybody in Facebook land. Get ready to start in a second.
Drink those right here?
Yes, I said it right there. We didn't know whose it was. Sorry, I didn't drink that much of it.
It's all right, I'll share.
Cool. Here we go.
Whataburger's a paid sponsor, so we'll just
What about Little Caesars?
I didn't get any Little Caesars, so I don't know. Channel 2, we're gonna give yours a couple more minutes.
You can go. He'll get it when he gets there.
Okay.
You guys gonna give all your names?
You gonna start?
Yeah. Give all your names and titles.
Okay, let's start at this end.
Okay, my name is Chris Moe, M-O-E. I'm on the board of the Oklahoma Cannabis Trade Association. I'm also a volunteer with Green the Vote. I also run my own page is Uncle Grumpy, and that's how most people know me.
Isaac Cavanis, president of Green the Vote, also a board member of the Cannabis Trade Association, and here to represent the citizens of Oklahoma in this lawsuit.
How do you spell that, Isaac?
ISAAC, Cavaness, CAVINESS.
Ronald Edward Durbin II. I am the attorney for Kenny Wogeman and Green the Vote that's led by Isaac Cavaness, and I'm the one who drafted the lawsuit that we're here about today. Durbin, D-U-R-B-I-N.
My name's Kenneth Wogeman. I'm here with them to fight the Department of Health on their decisions because Oklahomans need a voice.
How do you spell your last name?
It's W-O-G-O-M-A-N.
And his name's in the proceeding, so you guys should have all that. So I'm Chip, C-H-I-P, Paul, P-A-U-L. I'm chairman of Oklahomans for Health. Oklahomans for Health was the proponent of 788. I'm also a board member of the Oklahoma Cannabis and Trade Association.
Okay, guys, we've all been dealing with the outrage from the public on the regulations that the health department put into place earlier this week and was signed by Governor Fallin. We've come together as Green the Vote, Oklahomans for Health, Oklahoma Cannabis Trade Association, and all the citizens of Oklahoma to try to bring some reasonable regulations back into play here and address the egregious over-regulations that the health department has tried to put into place behind closed doors. So with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Ron and let him explain exactly what's going on. So
Sure. Prior to undertaking this litigation, Oklahomans for Cannabis and Green the Vote tried to work with the Oklahoma Department of Health to pass sensible regulations to implement 788, with the primary focus being get patients the medicines that they so desperately need. We had believed that the Oklahoma Department of Health was going to listen and go along with the sort of mediated ideas and regulations that would be put into place. Unfortunately, all of those have been quashed by what they actually did. I want to point out, sort of at the very beginning of this, that one of the things that we're doing with this lawsuit is to try to encourage any other citizen or group that wants to bring an action related to these matters to join in what we're trying to do. The more the merrier as far as we're concerned. What we don't want to have happen is we don't want 50 different lawsuits or 100 different lawsuits across the state of Oklahoma all fighting for the same thing. Also, one of the things that we did with this litigation, and I want to point out at the very start, is we did not seek any kind of temporary or emergency injunction. There's a reason why we didn't do that. We do not, as bad as what the Oklahoma Health Department did in their implementation of these rules, we want the patients in the state of Oklahoma to get whatever it is they can get under these regulations. We don't want to stop or slow down even this bad implementation of 788 because we believe that it hurts the citizens of the state of Oklahoma. That is a key point we want to make, and we would encourage that anybody else that is looking at filing litigation related to these matters to please do not seek injunctions that will stop the implementation and stop the flow of the medicine to the patients in Oklahoma that need it. We couldn't be more serious about these issues medically, and we want to encourage all attorneys and all citizens to keep that in mind with what they're doing. We are not out here supporting big business. We are supporting the people of the state of Oklahoma and the patients that need access to medical cannabis. Now with that, after the State Department of Health released a proposed set of regulations on June 26th, there were mediations and discussions related to those regulations. There was a subsequent edition that came out on July 3rd of this year that had the proposed regulations to be considered at the July 10th meeting of the Oklahoma Department of Health. We believed, as did every citizen, I think, in the state of Oklahoma, that those were the matters and those were the issues that were going to be adopted by the Oklahoma Department of Health. Through some information, research, and conversations with people involved in the process, we believe, and we believe we have evidence, that there were behind-the-scenes negotiations and discussions among certain members that we've named in this lawsuit to bring forth the amendments that essentially destroy the intent of 788. Those amendments that were brought forth by the 5 members of the board and passed by those 5 members against the 4 others that voted against, create prohibitions and roadblocks into the implementation of 788, which we believe cannot stand. When the Oklahoma Department of Health released its agenda for the July 10th meeting, there was nothing on that agenda which would in any way lead any normal average citizen to believe that there were going to be any amendments considered. In fact, the Oklahoma Department of Health, and what we believe was an intentional deceit, specifically noted that there would be no comments from the public at that meeting because they were only going to be considering those regulations that had come out on the June 26th version and that public comments had been allowed on. Obviously, we now know that that was not the truth. They had written proposed amendments ready to go that we believe had been pre-discussed, pre-negotiated, and previously agreed to before the meeting ever began. In Oklahoma, we have some protections that a lot of other states don't have, and that's the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act. The suit that we have brought here today is under several different things, but one of the primary focuses is the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act requires our legislative and government entities to be open and transparent to the citizens of the state of Oklahoma. They are required to provide sufficient notice to the citizens of what is going to be discussed and decided upon at any meeting of a board. The Oklahoma Department of Health certainly qualifies. These members of the Department of Health knew that they were required to disclose what it is they were going to propose at that meeting, and they didn't do it. And the fact of the matter is, the law considers and contemplates exactly what these 5 members did, and it specifically prohibits it. Because what the Open Meetings Act says is that if members of a board are going to meet outside of a regular meeting, if it is a majority of those members for purposes of deciding on an issue, that in and of itself is an open meeting that's subject to notice, advance notice to the citizens of the state of Oklahoma. That didn't happen here, and this lawsuit seeks to set that right. It is our belief that the members that participated in this conspiracy to defraud the citizens of the state of Oklahoma are guilty of a misdemeanor in violating the Open Meetings Act. And we would call on the attorney for Oklahoma County, the district attorney for Oklahoma County, to file charges against those 5 members for violation of the Open Meetings Act. It is a misdemeanor, it carries a potential fine, and it carries potential jail time. And we'd ask them to act, just as they've acted against all of those patients that needed medical marijuana and did it in violation of the laws of the state of Oklahoma. That's what these board members have done, and our lawsuit seeks to address that. The Open Meetings Act, because of these violations, we believe nullifies what the Oklahoma Department of Health did at their meeting. Besides the fact that notice is required, we also have additional issues with what the Oklahoma Department of Health has done. And our lawsuit is the first step in beginning to address those issues. When a rulemaking body is tasked with putting statute into regulatory schemes, they are responsible for making sure that those regulations that they instill are not what we call in the law arbitrary and capricious. For lack of a better term or an easier term to understand, they've got to have some rational basis in reality. And it's our position that the Oklahoma Department of Health, in coming up with their regulations, created a myriad of regulations that have no rational basis in reality. To call them crazy would probably not be an understatement. Some of those, and we're going to address many, many of those in this litigation. I'm not going to get through all of those here today, but one of the ones that I think is the most obvious is the 20% THC limit on a grown flower. You're required under the current regulations to not harvest and process any THC flower that has a higher than 20% THC level. They are essentially asking the growers that are going to come into the state of Oklahoma to play God and know in advance what it is their plant and their flower is going to end up at the end of the process. That's an impossibility. That would be like punishing a soybean farmer for being more productive with growing soybeans, or a beef producer for being more productive with getting his cattle to grow larger quicker. Those are things that have no rational basis in reality, especially when, in their infinite wisdom, and I use that word facetiously, the Oklahoma Department of Health regulated and said you can't have a single serving of more than 12% THC. So what they've done is said, we're going to limit how much you can grow in a flower, but then we're going to require you to dilute it down to 12% regardless. Well, what does it matter then if the plant was 30%, 40%, 100% THC? You've still got to dilute it down. So there's no rational basis there. Being closed on Sundays. I guess what the Oklahoma Department of Health is saying is, hey, go get your oxycodone, just don't go get your medical marijuana. Pharmacies are open on Sundays. Walgreens pharmacies and other pharmacies are open 24/7. So why there's that restriction? There's no rational basis for such a decision. The restrictions with regards to how close the dispensary can be to a church. 788 that Chip Kelly and Oklahomans for Health drafted, Chip Hall, I'm sorry, specifically mentions 1,000 feet from the entrance of a school. There's no reference in 788 to daycares, churches. I love Oklahoma, but there's a church on every corner. We have restricted essentially anywhere a dispensary can be in a populated area. I guess people can go drive 50 miles to the middle of the county to get it, but that's not what the intention was behind 788. And he should know, he wrote it. The requirements of a pharmacist, to call that arbitrary and capricious is an understatement. You're requiring a pharmacist to dispense a Schedule I narcotic against their DEA license and obligations. There's no way that that's going to be able to be implemented effectively in this state. A pharmacist would jeopardize their license and any other pharmacy they worked for's license by engaging in the behavior that the Oklahoma Department of Health has now mandated. One of the other key ones is they restricted outdoor grows. We're in Oklahoma, the land of the sunlight, and yet we can't utilize sunlight to grow medical cannabis. There is no rational reason why medical cannabis should be grown under lights as opposed to growing it outdoors and letting the sunlight shine down. Unless they have some kind of tie to some kind of power company or power lobby, there's no logical reason for this regulation. So this lawsuit will seek to address all of those things. We were glad to hear that committees have been created by the Oklahoma legislature to consider these issues. And all of these groups, I think I can speak for and say, will be proud and happy to sit down with any member of the legislature to discuss, debate, and try to come up with the most realistic, reliable, open format for allowing medical cannabis in this state. We want to encourage anybody that wants to endeavor business-wise or that thinks that they need it medication-wise and their doctor agrees to be able to get into this industry and to be able to get the medicine that they so richly deserve. That is what we're doing with this lawsuit. At the end of this, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. I'm going to introduce you real quick. You've already met him, Kenny Wogeman. Mr. Wogeman, he won't tout himself, so I'll do it for him. Mr. Wogeman is an Army veteran. He retired as a staff sergeant, or he left as a staff sergeant. He was a member of the 172nd Stryker Brigade, the 25th Army Infantry, the 1st Infantry Brigade. He served as a drill instructor. Mr. Wogeman served 2 tours of active combat duty. 2008 and 2009, he was serving an active combat role in Iraq, and then he served an active combat role in Afghanistan in 2011 and 2012. Mr. Wogeman is a named plaintiff in this case because he believes that all Oklahomans should have access to this, and I'll let him say anything that he wants to say at this time.
Really, like you said, I'm here because, I spent a lot of time serving this country. I'm done with it now, and I still feel like the people of Oklahoma need a voice. 57% of our people voted for 788 as it was written. As he said, whenever the rules meeting was taking place, there was no proposed amendments on the agenda. They just completely overstepped their boundaries and didn't listen to any of our voices. And that's why, I've sat and been silent. for the most part, and I'm here today I'm fed up.
Chip, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, you know, again, with SQ 788, we passed this law. As Kenneth just said, 57% of us passed this law. We went to the Department of Health really with very open hearts. We negotiated very honestly and, you know, in good faith with the Department of Health in red line sessions. Many of you sat in this room while we went through a red line session a couple of weeks ago. So we took all that to the Department of Health and negotiated in good faith with them, with the open-hearted and thought that they were really trying to write good regulations under SQ 788. I think it's very clear now what their intention was all along. It's very unfortunate too, and it's very disillusioning really as an Oklahoman, as an American. You work through a process and you get to the end of that process and you think that, you know, it's gonna go how it should go. And this isn't going how it should go. And everyone, as Americans or Oklahomans, should be appalled by what's happening here. So we're very pleased that Kenneth and Green the Vote and through Ronald is stepping up and filing this lawsuit on really behalf of all the citizens of Oklahoma, but in particular the medical cannabis patients of Oklahoma. So we're pleased, encouraged, and very supportive of this effort.
Isaac, either of y'all have some to add?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to say that I personally believe that this problem is only going to be solved from the top down. And if that over 500,000 people that voted for 788 will get together, we can pick the next governor, and then things like this won't happen. We have to change the flavor of the power in Oklahoma. And that's no matter how many petitions we throw at them, we're going to have these hurdles. We've got to fix this from the top down. So I would just ask everybody to get involved and be ready, and let's figure out who that cannabis candidate is, and let's put that person in office. And that's how we fix this.
One last thing I've got to add as well is one of the big motivations that I have for being a part of this lawsuit is to try to give notice to all of the state officials and law enforcement around the state, as Chip has experienced in Rogers County. These officials keep trying to step on our rights. They keep violating our rights. They keep telling us where we can and can't be when we're gathering signatures for a petition, or whether we're just out trying to spread information about whatever it is that we're pushing. We constantly get our rights violated. So hopefully this will give notice to all of those agencies that we are American citizens, we do have rights, and we're not going to stand by and take it anymore. We're not going to let our rights be trampled on any longer.
Yeah, and let me just add one other thing, because I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this across the state for 4 years. I have never, ever, ever experienced the amount of angst that has happened since that Department of Health meeting. So guess what you guys did? You rallied the no's right along with the yeses. So that was brilliant, and thank you very much. So
one other thing before we open it up for questions, I do want to encourage anybody that's watching this that has concerns about what's going on. We already saw this coming. Isaac with Green the Vote came to me prior to 788 ever passing and sort of laid out what was going to happen to 788. And this is the nightmare scenario that he laid out for me. At first I was skeptical and didn't necessarily want to spend the time drafting initiative petitions, but he convinced me. And so before 788 ever passed, because of these concerns and exactly what's happened, they've just confirmed Isaac's concerns. We instituted 796 and 797, which are constitutional amendments. They amend the Oklahoma Constitution. We believe that those, if we can get enough signatures and they get on the ballot in November, will stop our legislators and our executive officers in this state from going against the will of the people. So I would encourage people to get on the Green the Vote Facebook page, find places, or Oklahomans for Health, get on their pages, find where you can sign these petitions, and read through them and see if there's something that you support, and if so, get in there, get them executed so we can get these issues for constitutional consideration. And with that, I will open up for any questions.
What's the specific evidence you have that those 5 board members conspired behind closed doors?
We do have specific evidence that we believe are going to come out in the litigation related to those. Because of certain witnesses' roles with the Oklahoma Department of Health, I don't really want to out them in a news conference. They certainly have fears of retaliation. But we've got it from multiple sources that there were these backdoor, backroom conversations and meetings. And I think that'll come out in this litigation. And we'll seek to establish that without having to out people who did the right thing by coming forward.
How close are you on getting your goal to 797? I just got out of a CBD store. He's out of pages. It's fired people up.
That is really a hard number to come up with right now. This week caught us all by surprise here at Green the Vote. This morning alone, I spent over $800 mailing out petitions to people who have requested them just yesterday. So yesterday alone, we processed almost 400 volunteer requests for petitions. That being said, we have around 300 stores in the state that are carrying our petitions, and all of them are running out of petitions at this point. We have 3 different printers trying to keep up with printing petitions right now, and we are working basically 24 hours a day processing those petitions and getting them out to people and trying to get the stores restocked. So our signature totals come out every Sunday at our 3 o'clock meeting here. The last Sunday, our signature total was 81,000 for the recreational 797 and around 74,000 for the medical 796. With the goings on of this week, we have every reason to believe that we've surpassed 100,000 at this point. Our end goal is to have over 150,000 signatures, but of course we know that we have to have 124,000 verified by the Secretary of State. So our goal is to hit that 150,000, and I believe the health department has helped push us beyond that goal.
And you weren't pedal to the metal before Tuesday like you are now.
We were pushing as hard as we could, but we wasn't getting quite the response that we needed to get. And after this week, that response has completely overwhelmed us. Go ahead.
I was just gonna, isn't it interesting though that probably the strategy here by the Department of Health or the governor, whoever kind of is really behind all this, was really to shut down marijuana in Oklahoma. I mean, it's quite evident by these regulations that just every screw that could be tightened is being tightened, and it doesn't even resemble 788 anymore. Well, look at the backlash. Guess what's going to happen? Now we're going to pass recreational marijuana.
And that's really the odd thing is, we filed 796 and 797 side by side. Our original intent was to make sure that 796 got accomplished, and that 797 was really just a test run to see exactly where Oklahoma stood without having to rely on polling numbers. We wanted to see some hard numbers. We had no idea that 797 really even had a chance of making it on the ballot when we filed it. We just needed to see what those numbers were. At this point, 797 is running well over 10,000 signatures ahead of 796. So what the people of Oklahoma are telling us at this point is, if these lawmakers didn't want medical, well, now we're going to cram recreational down your throat. And
Yep.
that's the response that we've gotten all week.
I got a question. They're saying that you can only solely grow it in Oklahoma, okay? The marijuana,
Mhm.
the seed. The seeds are not gonna be made here. They come from somewhere else. My second question to that is, we're talking about patients like myself. I'm a vet. And I'll be honest with you, we need byproducts. Walmart doesn't say we can only grow it in Bennington, wherever. We need byproducts that have good products for epilepsy, for ADHD. That's not gonna happen overnight.
Sure.
And they're telling us you can only grow it here. It takes anywhere from 4 to 8 months if you want a good plant. I only know because my daughter has 5 dispensaries in California. It doesn't grow overnight. And if you want, like you all said, to take 20%, when you've got a good strand, it's gonna grow like you said. It might be 30%, it might be 70%. And when they regulate that, there's not gonna be good medicine out there.
Yeah,
It'll be a generic brand.
I hear
We
you,
agree.
brother. We wrote a very good law. We wrote a
I know you did.
very good law that got completely corrupted by the Department of Health. So
That's
we're gonna get our law back.
Look,
We're gonna get our law back.
If you just look at the dates and when you're allowed to start planting seeds as a commercial grow, and you do the math, and you grow your cannabis, and you dry your cannabis, and then you cure your cannabis, and then you package it and you get it in the dispensaries, if there's any dispensaries, and you do the math, and you will work it out to be the exact same week that the lawmakers come back for the next session. So what happens is, they decide they haven't had their shot at it yet. We must make the mistake of sending the same people back there that are there right now this November. And in February, when we're getting ready to open our stores, we don't. And all that product sits there on the shelves.
Yeah.
And we, as they revamp the whole system, and I know that is the plan. I know that is the plan.
So Chris said something very important, and we up here, sitting up here, really are a lens that represent the combined and unified cannabis community. And, you know, they thought that, you know, we wouldn't have a high turnout for SQ 788 in the primary election. Well, that was wrong, wasn't it? 40,000 people, 40,000 more people voted for SQ 788 that didn't vote for any other political candidate. 500,000 people voted for 788. We will exercise that political power, and don't think for a second that we won't. Talk about green the vote, we'll wait till November. And boy, you better get on board the 788 bandwagon, because we will target you, and don't think that that's not effective, and ask a former senator if that's effective.
Are you referring to yen?
Maybe.
On the note where you want to get medicine to the patients, I've been speaking to investors, dispensary folks, with the pharmacist thing in place. They're saying, we can't afford this, we can't open. How are the patients going to get medicine if this pharmacist thing is still?
Well, and that's sort of,
Exactly right.
if I could, you know, that's sort of the thing that we've noticed with the regulations that were passed. If you look at them, they are designed in a creative way to essentially make this industry only be accessible to big grow operations and big dispensary operations. A mom and pop shop that wants to open a dispensary can't afford to take the financial risk of employing a pharmacist at $150,000, $200,000 a year guaranteed to open their dispensary. These grow operations, if they're going to grow at a maximum of 20%, you have to grow on such a massive scale, and the cost of opening such a grow operation, which you can't grow with sunlight under the regulations, is so enormous that it completely restricts and cuts off the market. There are some groups in Oklahoma that love that idea because they're for big business, they're for the dollar at the end of the day. But that is not what 788 was designed to do. That's not what the intention behind any of these groups is. And that's why we think this litigation is important, to try to stop those regulations that are doing nothing but creating the Walmart brand of medical cannabis in the state of Oklahoma.
But do you put an injunction in place on the pharmacist thing only? Because finding a pharmacist who's even going to bake an edible for you is a needle in a haystack.
We can
Even
amend.
while you're going through this.
Sure, we can amend the lawsuit at any time when we need and seek specific injunctions related to specific things. What we don't want to have happen is people to seek an injunction that would stop implementation of the entire process. If we decided to target that, that would be fantastic. One of the things that we're kind of counting on is it does take time for growers, once they have their license, to grow a product that can be extracted and be sold under the current regulations. So we think we have some time to try and work with members of the legislature if they want to come on board and try to work with us, or even the Oklahoma Department of Health if they want to get their head out of the sand and try to undo what we believe is business interest at heart decisions, and try to make decisions for the patients in the state of Oklahoma. We think we can do that, and if we can't, we can always amend and seek that at a later time.
I just don't see how the medicine that is approved is going to get to the folks if it requires a pharmacist.
We don't understand either. It's against federal law for them to dispense. It's a Schedule I narcotic under federal law. We don't either.
And what they've done right now with these regulations is they've allowed the home grows to stay in
That's true.
place. So if a patient is able to get his patient card, his or her patient card, they would be able to grow their own medicine. That is the one thing that really got left intact through all these regulations. So I would encourage anybody that as this moves forward and people are able to get their patient cards, to absolutely fill out that application, get your doctor's recommendations, and get those patient cards, because if a dispensary never opens, that would at least leave one avenue for
Absolutely.
a patient to be able to grow his own medicine. And
Which is why we don't want to seek an injunction here, because we don't want to stop that.
I would argue that they're not going to tinker with that at their August meeting.
There's no assurances. Honestly, we have no faith in the state of Oklahoma or the Oklahoma Department of Health that they're going to use a rational, realistic approach to implementation of 788. We don't believe that. That's why we filed this lawsuit. We're not sitting up here as we hope that they're going to do it. No, we're going to try to force them to do what they should. This is one avenue. 796 and 797 is another avenue. Working with the legislature is another avenue. We are open to all possible avenues to get what the citizens passed enforced and enacted in a way that it can be utilized for the intended purpose, which is to treat people that need medical cannabis.
On the November vote thing, we've seen teachers list with apples and marks by them. Are you all gonna be releasing a list with, I don't know, a marijuana plant next to a name? saying
Absolutely.
This one's for me? Because I mean, some people might be a little afraid to ask, are you for this thing still?
Oh, no, we absolutely, between us all, that is absolutely a goal. So we will, absolutely will have a voter's
You'll have a
guide.
green list.
Absolutely, we'll have a green list.
We had a
Absolutely.
question over here.
Yes, so pretty much you're saying if you voted yes on 788, you need to go out and sign these petitions to secure your vote.
Yes, whether you voted yes or no to take back our rights, yeah, everybody
Yeah.
needs to get out and sign
Yeah.
these.
And that's the thing with these petitions. These petitions aren't going to make cannabis legal in Oklahoma. They're going to give us the opportunity to vote on it again. And so this vote would be for constitutional amendments that would keep the legislature from being able to change the intent of the law. They have to be enacted the way that they are written. And if they were to make changes to that law, then they would have to send those changes back to a vote of the people. So right now, if you're wanting to have access to cannabis in Oklahoma, if you're wanting that insurance policy to make sure that the industry isn't overregulated to the point at which it cannot function, then 796 and 797 is that insurance policy, and we need everybody to sign those petitions.
You know,
The state of Florida would be a good analogy as it relates to the constitutional amendment side of things. The state of Florida passed constitutional amendments for medical cannabis, and that's why they were able to get their Supreme Court to overturn a lot of the restrictions and things that were being imposed on that industry in Florida. It was because they were constitutional amendments, which give the people the right, and it's a very high threshold for a legislature to enact a statute that circumvents that. And that's why we're pushing those. But again, we still hope that we can get 788 in place in the way it should be.
Yeah, and we will, because that's what we just passed into law, so we're gonna get it right, absolutely. But Oklahoma's for Health and SQ 788 has always been about patient rights. So to your question, Rick, we absolutely will do everything that we can to ensure that patients have access to medicine on August 27th, or at least be able to get their cards and then shortly thereafter have access to medicine. We would hope that anyone that files any kind of lawsuit, as Ronald said at first, does not do seek any kind of injunction that would jeopardize that. So that has always been first and foremost our goal, is getting medicine in the hands of patients. But I personally have never been a big supporter of recreational marijuana. I've been a large supporter of medical marijuana, obviously. We're now carrying the recreational petition in our retail store, and we're doing that because that's a personal freedom issue. And again, all of us are pretty mad, and we're not going to take it, you know. And I think that's just the bottom line. But I cannot believe, you know, the overstep, the overreach, and really the overreach into your and my personal rights here. It's beyond belief. It's beyond the pale. It's you know, do we live in America anymore? I mean, it's so frustrating to me.
Have you or anybody up there spoken with some of these yes commissioners since the vote?
No, I don't.
We were told they were gonna stick around and they didn't.
Yeah, I really don't think that there were yes commissioners, all right? So all of them voted yes to enact the regulations
I mean, the
as
yes
they
on
were.
the amendments, I'm sorry.
So are you sure that they were yes on the amendments? Are you sure that that wasn't just set up? I mean, it was, you know, it was a close vote, right? Ooh, wow, it was a close vote. Maybe we can sway 3 or 4 of them. That whole thing was a big puppet show. That was staged, in my opinion.
The Oklahoman tried to get a comment from Timothy Starkey, who's the president of the board of the Oklahoma Department of Health, and from the article that I saw, he refused to comment on any action that they'd already taken or this lawsuit or anything else. So I don't think the board's going to be talking.
Well, Alexopoulos told me I needed to have my questions through the State Department. I was just wondering if you all had better luck than I.
You have to send your questions through Julie Ezell, do you? Yeah.
And one other thing I will mention that, you know, I didn't kind of get to in the beginning, their own legal counsel for the board of the Oklahoma Department of Health told them not to do this. She advised them as strongly as she could advise them that what they were doing had serious potential legal consequences, and they did it anyway.
Yeah, and in no way, I'm sorry, but in no way, shape, or form, and you know, some of us have sat on public boards before. That doesn't happen.
No.
You don't go against the advice of your general counsel. That is stupidity. I mean, I hope they have errors and omissions insurance. But you don't do that. You just don't do that. You get sued if you do that.
Well, and the guy sat back, two of them, and said, well, this is all gonna be litigated anyway, so.
Yeah, why not?
Well,
Yeah.
I can assure the Oklahoma Department of Health that this petition that we filed did not begin to get drafted until, I don't know, about 9 o'clock yesterday morning is when I sat down and started writing this thing. So, no, we had no plans to litigate this matter. We hoped
No.
that they would institute actions and regulations that made sense. They forced this. They left us with no choice but to go this route. With that, if there's no other questions, we'll end this and thank everybody for coming.
I have one. I apologize. When you talk to these legislators, will you ask them if they read the LaGuardia report? Because that was where everything hinged. If they had read the LaGuardia report back in the 30s, this wouldn't even be an issue. It should have never been illegal.
Sure, I will definitely look at that, and we'll ask them about that as we talk to them. I don't think that asking that, we need to focus on 788 and what we've got now as opposed to what they shouldn't have done, 70, 80 years ago. Let's focus on what we have now and try to get them to do the right thing here. All right, thank y'all so much.
Thanks, good job.
Can I get you guys' names real quick?
Good job. If anybody needs a copy of the petition that we filed, I've got some extra copies up here.
Isaac, I-S-A-A-C.
And the last name?
Cavanis, C-A-V-I-N-E-S-S.
I apologize for catching you.
Oh, no, you're fine. Hey, Rondo. Oh, okay, let's hear that.